So today we will only talk about how. You remember that we have been talking about what, why, where, and today then it's about how. So this is part number 4 in starting up foreign trade. We will talk about different modes of entries. In general, what you need to think about as a company when you are entering into another country. We will in detail talk about different types of export operations, joint venturings and direct investments as well. Today I think that we will focus on the exports, the different types of export, and then next time on the other 2 bigger forms. We will also do a small assignment in the end, covering the themes of this lecture. All right. And as usual, if you have questions, we have the catch box for you when you need to ask some questions or give comments. All right. Some general things about mode of entry. When a company has decided to sell its products in a foreign country or its services, it's always about both products and services, then it should determine the best mode of entry. We know that there are several different types or modes. Each one of these have very specific characteristics, and they also then have specific benefits and drawbacks. And what we know for sure is that a company can choose one type today, and then this might change while the company is doing business abroad. So what they choose today might not be the final mode of entry. So this is things that is changing all the time. If you look at books about this subject, then you can find many different lists on typical entry alternatives. This is one list that I have made here with the different export models in the beginning, then licensing, franchising, sales office. A sales office can also be then part of the export operations, or a sales office can be part of the own company. There can also be different types of contracting. Sometimes licensing and franchising are part of the contracting modes, or different types of joint companies. And then in the end, finally, the own manufacturing company or the own company abroad. So if you look at different books, you will find different lists. And I'm going to present yet another list. And I'm not saying that this is then the only list there is, but I think that the one that I'm presenting is useful. It has been working for many years, and I think that it still is kind of useful. So this is a list that I think has some good points to it. And we actually divide the options into 3 bigger ones here, as you can see. We have exporting, and then we have different types of joint ventures, and then in the end, direct investments. The middle part, the joint venture part, is mainly then based upon contracts and mainly based upon cooperation with other companies as well. And exporting and direct investment, here you do a lot of the work on your own, especially in own export. And if you have, for example, some type of direct investments. Of course, it can also be based upon contracts and based upon cooperation sometimes. Something that I especially like about this picture is the arrow at the bottom of the picture. You see the word low and high, and then amount of commitment, risk, control, and profit. So if you start out with the export, you know that here the amount of commitment is kind of low for the company. The risks are also low, but also then how much they can control their operations, that is kind of low. And profit might also be a little bit lower than compared to having some other mode of operation, especially if you have indirect export. So in the first of these, there are low amounts of commitment, risk, control, and profit. And then if you compare this to the direct investment, then you know that the level of commitment is higher. You have to commit much more and make bigger investments as well. And then the risk also is greater. But what is a benefit is that you can control your operations totally, or at least more than if you are exporting things. And also perhaps the profit can be higher in the end. So the arrow in the bottom of the picture is kind of important, and it kind of describes the benefits and drawbacks with each of these methods. Do you have any questions or comments? Feel free to ask anytime. But if not, we will then continue to take a look at the first type of exporting. We will go through 3 different types of exporting: indirect, direct, and own. When we talk about export, it is something that we generally say when we say that we are selling products or services abroad. It's a general term for trade across boundaries. But then it's also a specific mode of how to do the trade. So by export you have 2 different meanings of the word. And now we're talking about the mode of entry. The simplest way to enter a foreign market is actually through export. This is because the company produces all of its goods in its home country, and they might then sell the products as they are to the foreign country, to the foreign market. Or they might do some small changes on the product that it's suitable for the foreign market. So generally this has been used for producing manufacturing companies when they are selling their products abroad. As I said, we will talk about 3 different types of exporting. If you look at other books, they might have only 2 different methods, and they might be a little bit different from these ones. This is a definition that I have found in a book by Luostarinen and Welsh, and it has been a useful definition, I think. So we have the indirect, and here you see a sentence that it says with middlemen in the home country. And I will soon explain what this means. Then we have direct, and here we have middlemen abroad. And with own export, then we are not having any middlemen at all. In some books, you see that this is also called direct export. But then there are also the other definition on direct export, and I think that when you look at the whole picture, this definition here makes more sense in a way. So the defining factor is the use of middlemen. What is then a middleman or a middleman? Well, that's a company or an organization that helps with export or import. There might be many different types of middlemen or intermediaries that are helping companies with export and import. And we also have these types of companies here in the city and in this region especially. So we will take a look at some examples later on. But let's continue on to take a look at a picture that is describing this really nicely as well. So here we have the 3 types of exports. We have the one in red, that's indirect export. And then we have the yellow one, direct export, and the green one, own export. And you see the producer, the manufacturing company here. And then you see the customer abroad. And here we have the border. And MM stands for middlemen, of course. So in indirect export, you have at least one middleman in your home country. And then you can have middlemen abroad as well. But you can also sell directly to the final customer abroad from this middleman that will help you in your own home country. Then indirect export, then you are also using middlemen, intermediaries, companies that are helping you, but they are in the foreign country. So not in your own home country anymore, but in the foreign country, at the new market. And there might be just one middleman, but there might also be more than one. And then we have own export. And here you see that we are not using any middlemen at all. No intermediaries here. The company is taking care of exports on its own towards the final customer. So keep this picture in mind, because we will now start to go through the three different forms one by one. And it is then based upon this picture. Questions, comments? No? All right. We will continue on then. And we will start with indirect export, the red arrow on the picture. And here the definition is that the company has a middleman in the home country, and the company might also have a middleman abroad, but it doesn't have to. And by having a middleman in your own home country, it means that you don't directly take care of the export activities on your own. Instead, there's another company that are helping you with these. And this is then the middleman. The company can be, for example, a domestic distributor, for example, an agent, or it could be a joint export organization. There are many different types of these. They can be privately or publicly owned export organizations, and then also other types of companies. This is what different types of middlemen exist. And if you read books upon these things, you will find many different examples on middlemen and so on. But I think that an agent is probably the thing that you recognize mostly. Indirect export is something that companies usually use when they start up their foreign business. And they usually use this only in the beginning of the process, and then later they move on to other types of modes. So this is usually a temporary form. Do you see any reasons why they start up using indirect export? Any benefits by using indirect exports, and why they should then continue to use other forms later? What are your thoughts upon this? Here's the catch box if anyone would like to add some comments. No comments. Well, I will give you the benefits and drawbacks with indirect export then. So the benefits, low risk and a simple way to start, especially if the company has no previous experience. So the risk is kind of low in one way. But I will also then tell you why the risk is a little bit higher. But it's simple because the company do not take care of export activities on their own. Another benefit is if the company has limited resources, then this might be a way to be active on yet another market, and the company can then also have direct export to other markets. Resources in the way that they might have a small export department or only a few persons handling export to some specific markets, and then these persons cannot handle yet another market, but then some other company can take care of the exports to this new market. So they then instead pay someone outside of the company to to do the exporting activities for them. So they need some monetary resources, but they don't have to have the human resources, the personnel on their own. Another benefit is that this can be a good alternative if the market is geographically and or culturally remote and where it demands special knowledge. So if we, for example, are already exporting to neighboring countries, but if we then see an opportunity in another country that is really, really far away, both geographically and culturally, we might not have the necessary knowledge. But then there might be other companies that have specialized in this market, and then they can help us to enter this market. So this is something that why a lot of companies perhaps use indirect export to get their foot in on demanding markets as well. One benefit, if you have a really, really standardized products or bulk products that a lot of companies can produce, is that then you can actually use a joint exporting organization that will take care of all the products made by many different companies, but then they are sold as one product in a way. So then you get a lot of products sold by the effort of just one company instead of all the different companies trying to sell their products on their own. And perhaps the buyer also is demanding huge volumes, and this then might be the way of getting huge volumes when you're combining the resources from many companies. So that's a list of some of the benefits. There might be others as well. Let's take a look at the drawbacks then. Well, one of the first is that it's costly. Why is this costly? Well, you have a lot of middlemen, and the middlemen would like to have their share. So you have to pay the middlemen, all the intermediaries, all the companies helping you. They are usually not doing these things for free, so you have to pay them. And that can be costly. The more middlemen you have, the more the costs. A big drawback is that this mode might then block the information flow. You might not get information from your customers. You might not actually know what your customers think about the product that you are selling to them, because the middlemen might not tell you what they have heard about your products from your customers. So perhaps you can make perhaps you have unhappy customers, but you do not know the reason because the information has not come from the customers to your company. So they block that the part that it blocks the information flow is really a big issue, I think. Really a big drawback. It's also the most inactive mode of doing business abroad. Well, you are actually not doing business abroad. So you're not learning anything on how to do business abroad. You are providing your products to the middleman in your own home country, and they will then take care of the exporting, all the paperwork, all these things. So it is kind of an inactive way. You are not learning that much. And then also, if you do not receive the results that you have thought that you would receive, it might depend on the middleman. The middleman might not be active enough. He might not care enough to take care of your business. He might be representing many companies, and perhaps he thinks that some of the other companies, well, perhaps they are paying him more, so then he takes care of their business instead of yours. So it's something to have your own business, but also then to have someone else to take care of your business for you. It's a long process, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work that well. So a list with benefits and drawbacks Are there something that you would like to add? Something that you would like to discuss? If you are not agreeing upon something that I said, you can always discuss and ask. All right. Well, that was indirect export. Let's continue on then with direct export, because then you see the difference and get to know the benefits and drawbacks a little bit more. So if you have direct export, then you do not use middlemen in your own home country. Instead, you have middlemen abroad. And you are then taking directly care of your own export activities. You are the company dealing with the customs, dealing with the papers for the transports and everything, because you have to send your products abroad. The middleman here can be a special distribution company for import purposes, because it's import for them. It can be, for example, an agent, a broker, or simply called importer. It can also be the same, a joint buying organization, publicly or privately owned, but then it can also be other forms. It can be a company, an industrial firm that is buying your raw materials or products, and that they then sell to their own customers, functioning as an importer in a way. So many different types of middlemen. The list can be really long here as well. And as you can see, this is a more active way of doing exporting. And we also then need some knowledge about how to perform export activities. And we also need to have some more resources, personnel within the company that can take care of the issues here. If you have worked with exports and if you have dealt with customs, you know that there are a lot of papers to be filled in. So you probably need to have someone within the company that are specializing on these issues to be able to do it the right way, the efficient way. Even though everything is more or less electronical these days, you still have to put in the right numbers. So someone should know these things inside the company. That was direct export, and let's take a look at the benefits and drawbacks. One of the first benefits is, of course, that the distribution chain becomes shorter. This is compared to the indirect export, because here we don't have the middleman in your own home country, only abroad. Another big benefit is that the company is actually in more direct contact with target markets. We are selling our products and moving them physically to the other country in a way. So we actually can get the feel of what this is all about if we are visiting the target country and so on. And through market distribution and customer knowledge, the company is able to adapt its products because we have a little bit more knowledge now than through indirect exporting. And this means that we can make strategic plans. We can also cooperate with other companies that are working in this country. So here you have some benefits that you are actually in the target country. You have direct contact with someone in the target country. The drawbacks then, well, demands much more international business knowledge than indirect exporting. Yes, of course, since you have to take care of these on your own. You have to know when to fill in the right forms at the customs and so on. It also demands greater financial resources, in a way, direct at least, since you have to have the personnel that are dealing with these things. But on the other hand, you do not have to pay a lot of middlemen, but still you have some. And these then would need to have their costs covered as well. A big drawback is that this still can be less efficient and some information filtering when compared to own export. So still, you have middlemen, you use middlemen, and they might not tell you the whole truth about what customers think about your products and all these things. Or if the customers are suggesting some improvements, they might not tell you these things for some reason or other. And you have different steps. So it might not be that efficient than if you are handling everything on your own. So that's direct export. Should we take a look at own export then? The third form. Yes. Here, the company has no middlemen at all. It's thus taking directly care of the export activities. Here someone says that if the company has its own sales unit abroad, it is not considered as own export, then it's considered as a direct investment or something like that. But as I said before, there are many different definitions upon these things. So usually when we talk about own export, it means that the production is done here and then we have customers abroad and the products are sold directly from the home office, the headquarters, to the customers abroad. So we might have a salesperson that are traveling and visiting these customers on a regular basis. And one of the best things is that we have the direct contact with the final customers and the market. I know that a lot of companies in our region has their own export. But then a lot of companies in this region also have their own sales units abroad. So two small differences here. But let's take a look at the benefits and drawbacks. Well, benefit, filterless and rapid contact with the final customer. You meet them a few times a year perhaps. You have email contact with them, you can Skype them and have meetings online. So you know what is happening. You can ask them direct questions and they will answer you. So this is really, really good. The information is not going through someone else. You get to get first-hand information here, and that's always valuable. You can also then develop a long-standing, mutually beneficial relationship with customers. And this is something that is a good starting point, that you have a relationship, because then as you go along with business, you develop trust, and that is always a good thing. It is usually said that this is the glue that binds businesses together. We need sometimes to have the human relationships to get things to work. Also then selling and marketing can be built upon the relationship. So in the beginning, it might be more difficult to get the contracts and everything, but when you have been dealing with the same persons or the same companies for some time, it will become easier. But also in a way more demanding, because as you get to know them, they might put higher demands on your product and so on. And together you can develop a really good product and so on. You can also then develop the foreign business in the way that you wish it to be developed if you take care of the export activities on your own. So that's another big benefit. Well, drawbacks. The drawbacks are mainly that if it's not enough to just be coming to the market every now and then. Sometimes it's not enough to just have a salesperson visiting every second month or twice a year or something like that. Sometimes the companies need a permanent person representing the buying company here, or the selling company. So if a permanent presence on the market is important for the buyers, well, own export won't be enough then. then you need to have your own sales unit perhaps. And also, if you need to have a lot of products in store, if you need a buffer stock, for example, well, it's not enough then to just be able to ship the products when the customers are asking for them, because still it might take too long. So some companies needs to have spare parts within a few hours. And sometimes the shipments from different countries might take a little bit longer than this. So if you have that kind of products and that kind of customers that think that they need to have spare parts or products, materials really, really fast, then own export won't do. And also, if you have a lot of customers abroad in many, many different countries, then it might be really complicated to have enough personnel that will travel to all of these and meet up with them regularly. And it's also expensive to have people that are traveling all the time, to pay for the flight tickets and the accommodation and for dinners, and then also the extra money that they get when they are traveling abroad. That's what Finnish people do when they are traveling for business reasons and so on. So sometimes it's not enough to have own export. And when companies realize this, they start to think about other options. But you can also then choose to have different types of export to some markets, and then other options to other markets. So within a company, you can find many different modes of entry and operating modes. That is one of the best things with this, that you don't have to just settle for one way of doing business. You can choose accordingly to the customers and to the markets different ways.